I'm going to try and skip through this as quickly as we can. So some of the slides we're not going to sort of talk about in detail. I'll pick up the first half of the presentation around about the first half. Jason will then come in, give the sort of middle to last part of the presentation. I'll come in at the end, give the final 2 or 3 slides, and then we'll come back together to take any questions and answers. There is in the presentation normally an embedded video. We're not going to show that tonight. It is available on our website, and the presentation that goes out and is distributed to you again should have that animated video embedded within it. So I think with that, I'm not going to spend any time at all on the disclaimer. We've already outlined that. Just very briefly, I'm Mike Kirk, the chairman, my colleague Jason Miles, the chief executive officer. I think we'll just leave it at that. We've both are chemical engineers, but we've got a slightly different background, which is actually very complementary, exactly suits what is needed within the business. And again, we'll come on and talk a bit more detail about the team that we've got here at Quadrise. Just to put a bit of context for you here, there is a global problem in the oil market. There is oversupplies, with both producers and refiners making too much heavy oil, and the recent IMO regulations, which came in January 2020, has further reduced demand of heavy oil products. These products as well are uneconomic for the refiners because they take around 60 to 80% of the residuals that come out of the bottom of a refinery, so the heavy, viscous, thick products. To make those into a fuel oil, they've actually got to dilute them down with the expensive distillates such as diesel. And that's purely to blend it to a viscosity that will enable it to flow and be used as a fuel. Because of this, a lot of these fuel oil products are quite polluting. They particularly give lots of black soot, and they consume energy to both handle and use. Just to give you an idea of the scale of the markets that we're talking about, there's around $135 billion a year of fuel oil that is sold annually. The big markets for us are the Middle East, around 50 million tons a year there, Africa around 7 million, the Americas around 9, and also the global marine market. And that's a very large market in itself. And the 60 to 80 million scrubbed, that refers to to operators that have actually put abatement equipment on board the vessels so that they can continue to consume high sulfur fuel oil products. Well, what is Msar and what does this do? Well, it's a technology that eliminates the need for oil diluents in terms of these expensive distillates. Instead of using these distillates, we actually use water containing around 1% of critical but a very small amount of additives. And that enables these very viscous residue streams to be cut up into very fine particles and then actually stay in suspension as an emulsion in this fuel. It saves the refinery using these distillates and selling at a discount, enables them to therefore significantly increase their profitability, and it provides the end users with an energy source which is around 10% cheaper in unit energy terms. And because it burns like a gas, it's actually much cheaper as well. It's much cleaner as well. We've actually produced this technology in this product over a long period of time that actually comes from a proven emulsion system that came in the early 2000s called ore emulsion. And that's something that Jason was instrumental in actually developing. Just in terms of our resources, we think we've got both a world-class team with the right mix of experience and knowledge to take this business forward. We've got both compelling IP, commercial know-how, and we've got the global partners that enable us to both develop and execute and further develop the markets for the fuel. And in particular, what was formerly AkzoNobel Nouryon, we've been working with over a period of about 15 years, and they are our sole supplier of these critical chemicals that we use.
Thanks. Yeah, so as Mike mentioned, the technology that we supply tends to be installed where the heavy oil is extremely viscous and is basically taken at temperature. So that tends to be either at the oil refinery or, in the case of an upstream application, at the upstream field where it comes out of the ground before it dilutes, so added ideally hot. And we supply our technology under 3 business models. The top 2 models are what we've focused on the last few years. The third model is a merchant model, which is obviously a model that we're looking at in the future. So we supply on a license basis, where we supply our services, a license and equipment and additives under a package deal. That's pretty low working capital for us, and it tends to be preferred by the oil majors. Certain applications we're looking at are tolling applications. That was something we did with Cepsa and Maersk as an example for the trial we did with them. And it's, you know, some of the oil companies that we're dealing with at the moment in terms of national oil companies are also interested in this type of approach as well. And that's where we basically supply the equipment ourselves. We have 2 plants on in our books where we can deploy them on the site, and we basically get a return by a fixed fee and a variable cost in terms of operations. And the final mode is something that we're looking at together with example with Freepoint, where we together with a large partner on the trading front will basically purchase a residue and then sell the Msar, and that's fully capitalized in terms of the system there. So that, and again, that's something we've done in the past as well. So 3 main business models in terms of what we supply. The competitive advantage of our particular product is twofold. Firstly, on the producer side, they utilize less distillates basically to produce their oil, so they get a higher return, a higher yield, as a result, make more money. In terms of what they have to spend on the producer side, it's pretty low capex. So for each module, it's $5 million, and that's an order of magnitude lower than most refineries would have to spend to get a similar uplift. The other aspect of our technology, which is quite unusual, is because it's modular, it can be installed in less than 12 months. So they can be operational on a modular basis according to their requirements in under 12 months, and that's in a refinery space. That's very unusual. Similarly, on the other side, on the consumer perspective, the conversion is very simple. We're using the majority of the fuel oil system on both sides, which means that the modifications needed are very, very low. On the consumer side, they end up with a fuel which is extremely stable. They know where the fuels come from because it's come directly from a refinery. It hasn't gone through an intermediary or a trader, and that can be a big issue in the fuel oil space, where there's been lots of problems, especially as a result of the new IMO rules, where product has been blended in, which has been damaging to the engines and boilers. The fuel itself, and this is quite key really, is that it's for the consumer side, because the refinery saves so much distillate, the refinery can then supply the end product at a cheaper cost per unit energy as well to incentivize the end user. So that means that essentially they get a saving in terms of fuel costs. They also get a saving in terms of efficiency because the fuel burns better, as Mike said, it burns like gas. So again, these projects can be basically tied up in less than 12 months, but it doesn't need the requirement of obviously the producer and consumer. There's also some ESG benefits as well over leaf. So in terms of the CO2 emissions, they're lower than having to basically upgrade your refinery. You're producing less distillates, so you're not shipping so much fuel oil, having to keep that hot all the time. Because the fuel is water-based, it burns at a much lower temperature to fuel oil. It burns at 100 to 150 degrees lower in terms of temperature. That produces less thermal NOx. So basically, for every % of water you add to a fuel, you basically reduce NOx by 1%. So we add 30%, hence a 30% reduction. One key aspect also to add to what we do is that because we have our fuel as a pre-atomized fuel, so the droplets are extremely small. They're sort of 5 to 10 microns in size, which again is several orders of magnitude lower than a fuel oil droplet. It means that the fuel burns extremely well. Basically, you get virtually 100% conversion from carbon into energy. Hence, you get very low or next to zero carbon in the ash. And black carbon is a big problem in the fuel oil space at the moment, where a lot of the vessels are passing near the polar ice caps and melting the polar ice cap. So it's the second largest contributor to global warming at the moment is black carbon. So that reduction, is key. And for for NOx and for black carbon, future regulation is coming to mitigate those. So again, Msar is a great solution to try and combat those issues together at the moment. On the social side, we're very proud that we're looking to provide a sustainable source of energy. We're partnering with some major companies that can supply emissions abatement equipment to try and improve the environment in some of the areas that we're operating in. And from a governance perspective, we operate according to the highest governance standards in our company, which is quite key to certainly the board, the QFI, the Quadrise board, but also the advisors that we work with are extremely extremely strong, and they're top tier advisors. You can see the logos there, all of whom have done their DD on the company and obviously the board. In terms of the value that's added, it's quite considerable. For the licensing mode, for the company itself, one licensing deal if we take a couple of modules of Msar supplied, that would basically equate to about 600,000 tons a year of fuel oil. That would provide sales to us of 20 to 30 million per year, and a margin of sort of $5 to $6 million per year. So one licensing project for us basically covers our cash costs very, very quickly. There obviously has to be, it's not all about Quadrise. For the consumer side and for the producer side, for this type of project, you're looking at a typical margin increase on each side of about $15 million approximately, for a very, very low implementation cost of sort of less than $15 million on each side. So capital paybacks on each side are 12 months. And obviously the refinery gets a higher distillate yield as well, produces less fuel oil, which is what every refinery wants to do at the moment because of the supply demand imbalance that Mike mentioned earlier. Thanks, Mike. Around the world, obviously it's a global market, and we access that a variety of different ways. We access it directly via our contacts in the oil industry, so we deal with oil majors directly. In terms of the European oil majors especially. Other parts of the world we deal with specific local partners. So in Saudi Arabia, for instance, we deal with the Al Khafra Holding Group, very well respected family company who are ex-SABIC and have a number of different ventures there in the power sector. We deal with Hawazin, part of the Al Kharafi Group in Kuwait. And in Asia, we're dealing with JGC Corporation for Japan, and API Poly GCL for China. Elsewhere in the Americas, we're dealing with Freepoint, specifically Mexico. We're dealing with Redliner, and we're dealing with a company called Valcor on an upstream opportunity in North America. So there are a number of different clients that we're dealing with, and again, we use a very targeted means of actually addressing those markets. Coming back to Morocco, which is one of our key projects, which I'll take you through next. We're using a local agent there called Yunus Msar, who's the ex-CEO of the power company. So our four main projects that we're focusing on, but there are others which we'll come on to, or which we can discuss in the Q&A session, are the Morocco project with the International Chemicals and Mining Group, where we've signed an agreement at the end of last year. It's a pretty good opportunity in that particular region. They're a big consumer of fuel oil for energy, for drying purposes. We have a pilot plant test that was due to start, obviously, pre-COVID happening. So we have everything, all the equipment and everything is on site, ready to go, and the fuel as well. And we're waiting to get back onto that site safely to actually carry out that particular trial. Given the slight delay in the program, what we've also done is brought forward phase 2 of the particular project, which was to look at studies, to look at the next phase beyond the pilot trial, which would be commercial trials. So we're working on those studies at the moment, directly with the client to keep the pace moving, try and not lose the time during COVID where we can't be on site physically. On the marine space, we're dealing with a couple of major owners who spent resources on putting something called scrubbers or exhaust gas cleaning systems onto their vessels. That enables them to use the heaviest components, which are generally low cost in the refinery as well. So that allows them to save a significant amount of money potentially with Msar. These ship companies, around 50 to 70% of their costs are fuel. So if you can save 10%, it's a real competitive edge, especially if you put a scrubber on your ship. So these guys that we're dealing with at the moment are they've done that. They're major players, and we're working with those two companies to complete the complete letters of no objection trials with those customers, with a view to then commercial supply. We're also dealing with a couple of national oil companies, both in Ecuador, where we're looking at a refinery project that could lead to power generation supply within the country and exports. And we're also dealing in Saudi Arabia to reinitiate the trial, which was delayed as part of the 2018 activity today due to energy policy changing slightly in Saudi Arabia, which is now stabilized, and liquid fuels are still being used to a large degree. As Mike mentioned before, 50 million tons are still being utilized. So we're looking to restart that project with our new partner and with the power company, together with the national oil company there. And this is just the final slide for me anyway, before I hand back to Mike, is just an idea of what the projects look like for us. So this is an example of a project in Spain, which we recently carried out for the Msar trial, was due to supply also the Saudi Arabian test facility as well. In the middle picture at the right, you see a sort of some shiny equipment. The sort of steel centerpiece is a colloid mill that generates the emulsion. It's a once-through system that's supplied in a container, in 40-foot containers, and the boxes below show you how basically we assemble our containers to treat the water, supply chemicals and additives. We have a control system, obviously within the 40-foot container, which integrates with the oil refinery or the upstream facility, and then we have on-site offices and laboratory as well. So we're basically self-contained, and we can deploy these units very, very quickly to commence the trials which we envisage during the remainder of this year and early next.
Thanks, Jason. I'm going to go through this very quickly. We went through 2019, went through a couple of funding rounds that gave us this platform for growth. When we actually came into 2020, we got funds that were going to take us through to the end of this calendar year. And through a combination of things that we chose to do early on in 2020, together with the impact of COVID-19, because obviously we've not been able to travel recently, therefore our travel costs have significantly reduced from what we expected. We've now got funding which will take us through to mid-Q2 2021. And I think the only thing I'd like to highlight there is, despite the fact that those costs have reduced in terms of travel, because of the way we're managing the relationships with clients, and we've got people in country in a lot of the areas that we're working at, we don't think this has actually significantly impacted our ability to deliver on the opportunities. And just in summary, we're a business that can actually solve a global problem of this huge swing from heavy to light oil, and we can do it now in a way which actually delivers for every part of that value chain, from the producer to the consumer. It enables a clean energy transition. We're producing a product that actually burns like a gas and has some significant environmental benefits. And as Jason's just outlined, we've got a global pipeline of opportunities. So with that, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll do our best to try and answer your questions.
And we've had a huge amount of questions here, and I think very many from shareholders. So there's some which are quite technical, and I might jump around a little bit from topic to topic. So please forgive me for that. And again, apologies if I don't get round to asking your questions. If you sent them in, but I'll try and get through as many as we can. So what is the latest on KSA Has there been any contact with the client since lockdown?
Jason, I think hand over to you on that one.
Yes, there's been contact with the client since lockdown. In fact, yeah, last week we were on a call with the power company concerned to go through some of the technical details of the trial. So yes, there's been a regular contact with the client during lockdown.
Okay, next I was going to keep on going. There's going to be a bit of interrogation here. Your partner Valcor appeared to be a highly capable EPC company. Do you agree they'll be able to install and commission the MSAR trial equipment without QFI personnel needing to be present? And how do you see the MSAR market developing in Utah?
If I come in quickly on that, because I know there's been quite a bit of interest about, Valcor and particularly some of their partners are saying quite a lot about this project. We've deliberately not said much since we made an announcement back in June of this year. We will provide an update to shareholders once we've actually got something definitive to say, which will be that we've entered into a contract with Valcor and their joint venture partners. But with that, if I can hand back to Jason just to go through on that specific.
Yeah, and Valcor are a very well-established EPC company. They have their own specialism, to be fair. That their expertise is really upstream facilities. Our expertise is actually putting together the Msar units and actually operating those and commissioning those, so that if a deal is to be struck with Valcor where we supply them a license, that will be Quadrise people actually commissioning the facilities there before they're handed over to the Valcor and Greenfield team.
Okay. There've been a few kind of general questions about developments with different partners and projects. And you said in this COVID environment, you're confident your prospects and your timelines are effectively, you're able to keep on working as normal?
Yeah, I think as normally as I think anyone could. I think if we looking back now, I think we are really, really pleased with how things have progressed. And I'd say we've actually seen in some areas an acceleration in areas that we probably were really very pleased with over this period. So I think we are as positive as we can be that we've been able to mitigate the actions of COVID, and we're obviously anxious to get back out there and start visiting clients again. But because of the way we've undertaken our business development activities, we've been, and it isn't just fortunate, we planned it this way, we've got people in country who can continue to develop the relationships with our end user clients in a very effective way whilst we can't travel out there.
Okay, next one. Are you the only company with an emulsion technology for this purpose? Are there any competitors? And same questioner has also asked, what is the percentage water in the MSAR treated fuel?
Are you happy if I take this, Jason, which is
Sure.
very easy? No, there are no other competitors. We're the only one offering this product as an oil in water emulsion. You may hear of other emulsion fuel companies. Those are generally water in oil, and it is essentially 70% residue, 29% water, and 1% additives. And we only charge for the energy content of that fuel. So when we say 10%, we mean 10% on an energy equivalent basis in terms of that reduction. So the water is effectively given for free.
Next is, you mentioned the cash position through to, I think it's Q2 next year. Has there been any guidance as to when you might be cash flow positive?
No, there hasn't, and I think one of the things that we draw people's attention to on that is the part of the presentation that Jason outlined, which is, given the nature of our business and the very large operational gearing, it only takes one relatively small project for us to be cash flow positive.
And next one is a challenging one here. I'm just going to get it up again. Bear with me a second. You mentioned kind of the environmental and the ESG credentials, but there's also here a point of view that you're perpetuating the use of a highly polluting fuel, which could be a declining market. Could you speak to that? Have I got the right end of the stick or wrong?
Yeah, there are going to be different points of view on this. Our view would be very clearly the world is going to be dependent on fossil fuels for a very long period of time. as we make this change to a sustainable future based on renewables. Therefore, if you are going to be using those, it's really important that you make use of them in as an efficient and as environmentally friendly way as possible. And that's exactly what we do. These fuels are going to be used anyway. Our view is let's make sure they're used efficiently and effectively in the way that least damages the environment.
Okay,
I think just to add to that, Roland, we're also looking at ways of actually improving the carbon footprint of the fuel as well, with a view to potentially blending in some of the more sort of biodiverse streams and bioavailable streams which are carbon neutral. So if there's a way of doing that economically, then that's certainly something that we're investigating at the moment.
And one final question, because we are out of time, but we've had a few people ask about Morocco. How quickly could you get the trial going once there's the green light to do so, and then how long to get kind of data from that trial?
Jason?
Yeah, I mean, a matter of weeks in terms of when, because we have basically all the equipment's there ready to go. We've got modular units which just need to get piped in, so that's very quick. And in terms of the data that's needed, that's again for the first pilot trial, that's deliberately limited in scope to get us to the commercial trial phase. So again, relatively quick. So we're gearing up to sort of early Q4 trial at the moment is the plan.
Lovely. Gentlemen, we are out of time. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. Thank you for presenting.